the interview with that you do with the serial killer in the first one, in the Boogeyman, was so poignant and so realistic and unsettling that I could have swore that you talked to a real life serial killer. And I know you mentioned when I asked you about that, you hinted ever so subtly that that you would like to explore the connotations of that conversation. You might want to explore that a little bit further in some future works. Do you think that is that kind of the catalyst for the sequel, or is that what transpired in that conversation going to sort of bleed into the sequel, or
There's a little bit
play a
of
big
that
part?
there. I actually have some extensive notes for a completely different book that involves that, the
Oh,
idea of
okay.
this guy, talking to incarcerated serial killers
Yeah.
and just kind of crossing some lines and that turning into the story. So that's always kind of been there, but yeah, I mean, it, like Silence of the Lambs,
Yeah.
where you have someone who is behind bars, who has done all these awful things, and you're in a position where you're a little dependent on that person. So yeah, I've always been intrigued by that idea. That'll come into play some in the sequel.
Okay.
But I think a lot of it is about the kind of fascination that we have with evil and people who
Right.
do these things. And, it's a very real thing. And, from the groupies to the people who actually, marry, get married to these people and just, even it's there in pop culture, and I tried to look at that a little bit with the first one, where I was, I make my living being surrounded by, these dark things. And the vast majority of it is just make-believe stuff, make-believe monsters. But then there are these human monsters that exist who really
Right.
do these things. And, where is that line that you don't want to cross? Because that fascination from all of us readers, movie viewers, movie makers, all of it, it's there. So that's to me always been the interesting thing.
Yeah, no, me as well. I mean, that's why I've always been drawn to horror as well. And I think a lot of folks have, and why I think it's the best genre out there as well, because it really does explore those dark facets of the human condition. And I think that in order to fully understand the great things that people are capable of and to appreciate that, it's important to understand, the not so great things that people do. And I know you mentioned, kind of where that line is. I think a lot of the times it's a pretty blurry, sometimes even invisible line, where you're not really sure um where at what point of the footsteps did you actually cross over that line. And a lot of times it's very similar. There's, for one of the things I love about horror, of course, and reading about stuff like the Boogeyman, and even some of the aspects of Gwendy's the series of Gwendy as well, when especially when you have something that's at a crossroads and they make a choice one way or the other, what pushes them one way or the other, when there's no
Right.
discernible reason for them doing that. It's just simply how they're built, how they're designed, but then exploring things of, okay, well, maybe there's something we could have seen in that, maybe there's something we could have done about that, or maybe there's nothing we could do about that except what we can personally do about it, and how it affects our lives and things around us. So I always find that very fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, because it's a really thin line that exists between just natural curiosity and then
Yeah.
fascination, and then you have obsession, and when it comes to that, in society, like we both said, the lines are really blurry. And
Yeah.
I think once you cross certain lines, it's tough to go back. But
Yeah.
it even applies to like true crime. Some people read it just because there's a genuine curiosity in the human nature and how investigations are handled and all that. And then
Right.
I think you have a certain percentage of people who are reading that stuff and, getting off on the violence and the, just the tragedy. And it's yeah, I mean, I'm like the most optimistic guy out there, but I'll be the
Yeah.
first to say it's a dark world out there, and there's a lot of those blurry lines, and that's what's always fascinated me about
Yeah.
the human monsters, is because they're us.
Right.
They're there, and they live next door to us, and they're in line with us at the grocery store. And to me, that's the most frightening thing, and the
Yeah.
most the most, no matter how much material I've read or watched, or even written about it, that's still the most difficult thing for me to grasp, is that they're right there next to us. They're just wearing masks. And that's, to me, that's terrifying.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Same as well. I mean, if somebody could be, I don't know, packing your grocery bags one day, working at the store, and they could be filling body bags the next day or something. Like you know. And then I love that about the boogeyman as well, that you never really know who he is, and you don't know if he's the guy that, you know, you, who of course plays the main character in that book. It could be one of your great friends. It could be, you know, maybe even a family member. You don't know, somebody you went to school with, somebody that you know, you just finished sweating up a storm playing basketball with out on the courts, and
Could have been
you know,
me. You know, I could have been the ultimate unreliable narrator. And I know
yeah.
several who were like, I was convinced it was you halfway through the book. You know? So yeah, that's again, that's where the
Yeah.
fascination lies. And that's where for me, that's where the such terror, you know, lies, because it's happens all the time, unfortunately.